Three mountain men lived alone in that valley for 12 years. No wives, no daughters, no strangers ever climbed the narrow road that twisted through the rocks. So when the cabin door opened that winter night, and a young Asian woman stood beside their stove, every rifle in the house came up at once. Snow clung to her hair. Her coat was thin, too thin for the Wyoming mountains, but her eyes were steady. "I know how this looks," she said quietly, "but if you send me back down that mountain tonight, I will be dead before morning." The three Coulter brothers said nothing. They had learned long ago that trouble never climbed a mountain without a reason. And this girl was trouble. Her name was Mei Lin, and none of them knew yet that letting her stay inside that cabin would change everything. Because the men hunting her were already riding up the valley. Earlier that evening, the Coulter ranch had been exactly what it had always been: silent. The ranch sat deep in the narrow valley where the mountains pressed close on both sides, a place most travelers avoided. Winter held the land in a frozen grip. Snow lay thick across the fields. The river had hardened into dull gray ice. Even the wind sounded tired as it moved through the pine trees. Inside the cabin, the brothers ate dinner in the quiet way they always had. Thorne Coulter, the eldest, sat at the head of the table. Broad shoulders, dark beard, a man carved from the same rough stone as the mountains themselves. Beside him sat Wade, the middle brother, quieter, sharper, the kind of man who noticed things others missed. And across from them was Luke, the youngest, not yet 30, still carrying a little of the world in his eyes that the older brothers had long since buried. 3 men, 1 cabin, 12 years of silence. They had lived this way since the fire, since the night that took their parents and left the ranch to the 3 of them. Since that night, no woman had stepped inside the Coulter house. Until now. The door creaked slowly as Luke pushed it open. Cold wind rushed inside with him. Snow scattered across the wooden floor. But Luke wasn't looking at the storm. He was staring at the stove, at the small figure standing beside it. The woman turned slowly when she heard the door. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her dark hair was tied loosely at the back of her neck. Her face carried the delicate features of someone far from this land. Chinese, or maybe Korean. None of the brothers could tell. But one thing was certain: she did not belong in these mountains. Luke froze. Then his voice came out sharp. "Thorne!" The other 2 brothers stood instantly. Chairs scraped across the floor. 3 rifles lifted in the same motion. The woman raised her hands slowly, not panicked, not crying, just tired, very tired. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she said softly. Her English carried a faint accent, careful, measured, as if every word had been practiced many times before. Thorne stepped forward first, his rifle steady, his eyes cold. "No one climbs this mountain by accident," he said, "so start explaining." The woman hesitated, just for a moment. Then she looked at the door, at the darkness outside, and when she spoke again, her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "They're coming." Wade frowned. "Who?" The woman swallowed. Her fingers trembled for the first time. "Men who want $40,000. Silence filled the cabin. Then she added quietly, "And they believe I'm the one who stole it." The three brothers stared at her. $40,000 was not a small lie. Not in the mountains. Not anywhere. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Start from the beginning. Mei Lin lowered her hands slowly. She did not sit, did not move closer to the fire, almost as if she believed she had not yet earned the right to warmth. "My father owned a trading house in San Francisco," she said quietly. "Ships, silk, tea. But he trusted the wrong men." Wade leaned against the table, arms crossed. "And those men think you robbed them?" Mei Lin nodded once. "Yes." Luke frowned. "But you didn't." For the first time something flickered across her face. Not fear, something closer to exhaustion. "I took something," she admitted, "but not money." Thorne's voice hardened. "What did you take?" Mei Lin hesitated. Her gaze drifted to the window where snow still blew across the dark valley. "A ledger," she said. "A book with names. Men who move weapons through the mountains. Men who pay sheriffs to look the other way. Men who disappear people." Silence settled across the cabin. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Wade exchanged a glance with Thorne. They both understood what that meant. Trouble bigger than one frightened girl. "You bring that book here?" Thorne asked. Mei Lin slowly reached into the small cloth bag clutched against her chest. The brothers instantly raised their rifles again. She froze, then carefully pulled out a thin leather notebook. Worn, snow-stained. She placed it gently on the table. Luke stepped forward first. Curiosity always got to him faster than caution. He opened the ledger. His eyes moved down the page. Then his expression changed. "Thorne, you should see this." Thorne stepped beside him. The page was filled with names, towns, amounts of money. But one name sat near the top of the list, a name every man in Wyoming knew. Silas Crow. Wade muttered under his breath. "That bastard runs half the gun trade west of Denver." Luke closed the ledger slowly. "You stole this from him?" Mei Lin nodded. "Yes, and now he wants it back." The wind slammed against the cabin wall. Snow rattled against the windows. But another sound followed. Faint, distant. Hooves. Thorne turned toward the door. His voice dropped low. "How many men?" Mei Lin's answer came quietly. Too quietly. 5 when they left the town below the ridge. She looked up at them, her eyes steady again. But Silas Crow never sends only 5. Outside, a horse whinnied somewhere in the darkness. Thorn reached for his rifle, the old war rifle he kept above the fireplace. Luke checked the ammunition box near the door. Wade moved toward the window and lifted the curtain slightly. Snow blew across the valley, but in the distance, faint shapes moved along the mountain trail. Riders. Wade let the curtain fall. "They found you," he said. Mei Lin looked at the floor. "I told you," she whispered, "if you send me away, I die." Thorn studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up the ledger from the table, closed it, and handed it back to her. His voice was calm, but final. "You brought this storm to the wrong mountain." He turned toward his brothers. "Get the rifles." Luke blinked. "You're serious?" Thorn's eyes moved toward the dark valley outside. "Those men are coming here anyway, and no one hunts on Coulter land without paying the price." The riders reached the lower ridge just before midnight. From the cabin window, Wade could see their lanterns moving through the snow like small, angry stars. 5 men, maybe more behind them. Snow whipped across the valley, hiding their shapes, revealing them again, like ghosts riding through a storm. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. No one sat anymore. The Coulter brothers moved through the room with the quiet precision of men who had faced danger before. Luke stacked extra rifle cartridges on the table. Wade loaded the old double-barrel shotgun. Thorn stood by the door, watching the dark. Mei Lin remained near the stove, hands folded tightly together. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "They're only here for me." No one answered. Finally, Wade glanced over his shoulder. "Lady, if Silas Crow's men ride this far into the mountains, they ain't leaving witnesses." Luke nodded once. "He's right. Doesn't matter if we hand you over or not." Mei Lin lowered her eyes. The truth settled in the room like heavy snow. Outside, hooves crunched closer. One rider separated from the others and rode toward the cabin alone. The lantern hanging from his saddle swung slowly in the wind. Thorn opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle resting easily in his hands. Cold air rushed into the house behind him. The rider stopped 20 yards from the cabin. A tall man in a long black coat, hat pulled low. Silas Crow. Even in the storm, his voice carried easily. "Evening, Thorn." Thorn didn't answer. Crow smiled faintly. "You got something that belongs to me." Behind him, the other riders spread out slowly across the yard. Luke moved beside Thorn on the porch. Wade stayed inside the doorway with the shotgun. Crow's eyes flicked toward the cabin. That little Chinese girl in there stole a book. Now, I'm a reasonable man. You hand her over, and I ride away. Snow blew between them. No one moved. Thorn finally spoke. You rode onto my land with guns. You threatened my house. That makes you the unreasonable one." Crow's smile disappeared. "Careful, Thorn. You're protecting a thief." Luke leaned slightly forward. "She ain't the one stealing guns and selling them to killers." Crow's eyes hardened. "You boys don't understand what you're standing in the middle of. That ledger holds the names of men who run half the West, and every one of them will burn this valley to the ground to get it back." From inside the cabin, Mei Lin stepped forward. Her voice carried through the open door. "That is why it cannot return to you." Crow turned his head slowly. For the first time he truly looked at her. His smile came back, but colder now. "Well now, there she is, the bravest thief I ever chased." Mei Lin did not step back. "You sell guns that kill families," she said. "You deserve to be exposed." Crow laughed, a low, dangerous sound. "Maybe. But first, I'm going to take that book back." He slowly raised his hand. The riders behind him lifted their rifles. The valley fell silent. Thorn's finger tightened on the trigger, and the first shot shattered the night. The gunshot ripped through the valley like thunder. For half a second, no one moved. Then the night exploded. "Down!" Luke grabbed Mei Lin's arm and pulled her behind the thick log wall beside the door. Bullets slammed into the cabin. Wood splintered. Glass shattered across the floor. Wade fired first. The double-barrel shotgun roared like a cannon. One of the riders pitched sideways out of his saddle and vanished into the snow. Outside, Crow's men scattered. Some dove behind the corral fence. Others fired from horseback. Gunfire cracked across the valley, sharp, violent, relentless. Thorn moved like a man who had done this before. No panic, no wasted motion. He knelt beside the porch post and fired once. Another rider screamed as his rifle flew from his hands. Luke leaned out from the doorway and fired twice toward the corral. "Two by the barn!" Snow churned under the horses as the riders repositioned. Crow shouted orders somewhere in the darkness. "Take the house! They can't hold forever!" Inside the cabin, Mei Lin pressed against the wall, breathing hard. Her eyes moved across the room. Rifles, ammunition, blood on the floor where Glass had cut Luke's hand. This was happening because of her. She could hear Crow's voice outside, closer now. Luke noticed her staring at the rifles. "You ever fired one?" he asked quickly. Mei Lin nodded once. "My father taught me." Luke shoved a spare rifle into her hands. "Then welcome to Wyoming." She moved beside the window, carefully lifting the rifle toward the opening. Outside, a rider sprinted toward the barn door, trying to circle behind the house. Mei Lin exhaled slowly, steady, focused. She squeezed the trigger. The rider dropped instantly into the snow. Luke blinked in surprise. "Well, that's one way to introduce yourself." Outside, Crow cursed loudly. "Burn the barn!" he shouted. Smoke 'em out!" One of the remaining riders threw a lantern toward the hay stacked against the barn wall. The glass shattered. Oil spilled across the wood. Flames erupted instantly. Fire climbed the barn wall in seconds, bright orange against the white snow. Wade saw it first. "They're torching the barn!" Thorne swore under his breath. The cattle were still inside. Luke turned toward him. "We can't let them burn in there." For a moment Thorne hesitated. Then he nodded. "Cover us." The two brothers burst from the porch into the storm. Gunfire followed them instantly. Bullets tore through the snow around their boots. Luke slid behind the water trough and fired back toward the riders. Thorne ran straight for the barn door. Inside the cabin, May Lynn's heart pounded. She watched through the broken window as Thorne kicked open the barn door and rushed inside the flames. A gunshot cracked, closer this time. Luke staggered suddenly. His rifle dropped into the snow. May Lynn's breath caught. "Luke." Outside, Crow stepped from behind the corral fence. Smoke curled around him as he leveled his revolver toward the wounded man. "End of the road, boy." May Lynn raised the rifle again, her hands trembling now. Crow's finger tightened on the trigger, and May Lynn fired first. The rifle cracked through the night. Silas Crow jerked backward as the bullet tore through his shoulder. His revolver fired wildly into the snow as he fell. Luke collapsed to one knee, clutching his side, but he was alive. Crow's remaining men froze. For the first time since the shooting started, they hesitated. Inside the burning barn, the cattle bellowed in panic. Smoke rolled into the night sky. Then Thorne burst through the barn doors, driving the frightened animals ahead of him. Snow hissed as sparks landed across the yard. Wade stepped onto the porch with the shotgun resting against his shoulder. His voice carried cold across the valley. "Next man who fires doesn't ride away." The riders looked toward their fallen leader. Crow lay in the snow, bleeding and furious. For a moment it seemed he might order another attack. But the storm had grown heavier. The ranch was awake, and the Coulter brothers were still standing. Finally, Crow spat blood into the snow. "Mount up." His men lifted him onto a horse. Within minutes, the riders disappeared back into the dark valley, their lanterns fading into the storm. Silence returned. Only the crackle of the burning barn remained. Luke sat heavily in the snow. May Lynn ran from the cabin toward him. "Are you hurt badly?" He forced a crooked smile. "Just a scratch." Blood soaked through his coat, but the bullet had passed clean through his side. Thorne and Wade finished driving the cattle into the open field while the barn burned itself into blackened timber. Snow slowly smothered the last of the flames. By dawn, the storm had passed. The valley looked peaceful again, as if nothing had happened. May Lynn stood beside the cabin porch, watching pale sunlight spread across the mountains. The ledger still rested in her hands. "You should take it to the marshal," she said quietly. "Expose them all." Thorn looked at the book for a long moment, then shook his head. "We will, but not today." Luke leaned against the railing beside her, his arm wrapped in fresh bandages. "You planning on running again?" he asked. Mei Lin looked out over the frozen valley. For the first time since she had climbed that mountain, she didn't feel like prey. "No," she said softly. Wade nodded toward the burned remains of the barn. "Ranch could use another set of hands. And someone who shoots straight." Thorn studied her quietly. Then he spoke. "You brought trouble here, but you also fought beside us." He gestured toward the mountains surrounding the valley. "This land don't belong to cowards. If you want to stay, you stay as one of us." Mei Lin's fingers tightened around the ledger. For months she had been running, hiding, surviving. Now, for the first time, someone was offering her something different. A place. She looked at the three brothers standing beside the cabin. Men carved by storms. Men who had chosen to fight for her when they could have turned her away. Mei Lin finally nodded. "I will stay." Luke smiled faintly. Wade pushed away from the porch rail, and Thorn turned toward the rising sun over the mountains. The valley was quiet again, but things had changed. Because somewhere beyond those mountains, Silas Crow was still alive. And men like him never forget a defeat. But neither do mountain people. And now Mei Lin was one of them.